Hello, everyone, and welcome to our panel. My name is Colleen Carroll, and I'm a content publishing coordinator at Nexus Marketing and your moderator for today's session. Our panel topic today is Our Digital World, Getting in Front of Your Nonprofit Supporters. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation, but as usual, before we jump in and we get into this topic, I do have a few quick logistics to cover. NX Unite is made in partnership with Nexus Marketing, and the NX Unite mission is to make introductions that lead to lasting relationships and serve as a hub for connection in the mission-driven sector. As you saw in our video, on NX Unite, you can find upcoming industry events, suggested influencers to follow, trusted solutions, cause-driven podcasts, and of course, panels with experts such as these lovely folks here with me today. Quickly, I want to thank today's sponsor. Today's sponsor is Getting Attention. Getting Attention helps nonprofits expand their impact and reach more people through Google Ad grants. Your nonprofit may be eligible for a Google Ad grant, and Getting Attention can help you at any stage of the process, from application to reactivating lapsed grants. The team at Getting Attention will take the work of online advertising off your nonprofit team's plate so you can focus on what's most important, your mission. Visit their website here to learn more. And again, a huge thank you to Getting Attention for sponsoring this free educational content. Today's hour-long panel will include time both for questions curated by my team and questions from you all, our fantastic audience. We've already had a number of questions come in with registration, but if you are joining us live, please feel free to submit any questions you have for this group of panelists in the chat or in the questions tab, at any time during this panel, and we will address as many as we can in the second half. I will give priority to questions that come in from live audience members, so definitely get them in if you have anything. If at any point you are having any technical difficulties or have any logistics questions, please let us know in the chat. My team member, Malou, is under the contact team NX Unite, and she will do her best to assist. So give a little holler in the chat, let us know what's happening, and we'll try to figure out how to get you back on and enjoying the session as quickly as possible. I did also want to say that this panel session is being recorded. So if you get to the end and the insight you heard was just so fantastic, you need to hear it again right away. That's wonderful news. It's going to automatically be in your email inbox at the end of the session. Just give it a few minutes after we wrap up, and that link will be there. It will also continue to be accessible on the NX Unite website in the on-demand panel section. So if you have any friends in the industry who you're like, can't believe they missed it, they needed to be there, that session was perfect for them, send them that same registration list and they'll be able to access the recording. All right, finally, before I introduce our panelists, I do want to give a big thank you to our audience, whether you are joining us live or watching the recording. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day. Hope you enjoyed this session. Hope you learned something, and also hope that if you are joining us live, you will submit those questions so we can address the topics most relevant to you and your team. All right, to begin with the introductions, I'd first like to introduce Christina Edwards, who is the founder of Splendid Consulting. She is a marketing expert and a coach who helps ambitious social impact businesses and nonprofits increase revenue, awareness, and engagement. She's ever passionate about equipping organizations to step into their expertise, be bold, and find their unique voice and audience online. Her packed out workshops and courses spark enthusiasm, social action, and powerful results. Amplify Social Impact, her signature online course, teaches organizations how to make marketing movements that matter online. So glad you could join us today, Christina.
Thanks for having me. Good old unmute button.
Always. Thanks for being here. Also here today is Cliff Persad, who is the Director of Strategy and Creative at Canopy Studios, where he specializes in working with higher education and nonprofit clients. Cliff delights in working with organizations to elevate their online presence, making complex challenges complex challenges beautiful, functional, and optimized. With nearly 20 years of experience as a designer, instructor, and creative leader, Cliff brings a unique blend of creativity and strategic thinking. He's active in the crafting of user-first full lifecycle experiences from initial discovery through strategy, UX, creative, and technical development to create sites that excite clients and fulfill their objectives. So glad you could be here today, Cliff.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
As am I. Also here with us today is Ellen Bristol, who is the president of Bristol Strategy Group. Ellen considers herself a performance management nerd and a geek for metrics, or maybe the other way around. Her mission is to improve the success of nonprofit fundraising by adapting the most beneficial practices of high-performing sales teams and their managers to improve the performance of fundraising teams, including volunteers. She is known for her leaky bucket assessment for effective fundraising, the only popular study of fundraising team productivity in the sector. Glad to have you on another panel, Ellen.
It's always a pleasure.
Finally, here with us today is Jessica King, who is the business lead at Getting Attention, where she helps nonprofits acquire and manage the Google Ad Grant to expand their impact. Prior to her work at Getting Attention, Jessica worked in nonprofit and higher education organizations, focusing on communication and digital marketing, and most recently in search engine optimization in the mission-driven sector. Jessica holds a master's degree in communication from Virginia Tech, and in her free time, you can find her reading, building furniture, and hanging out with her cats, Benny and Olive. Glad to have you, Jessica.
I'm also excited to be here.
All right, we are going to jump in and get started. And Christina, I'm going to have you start us off with our first question. Why is considering your nonprofit's digital presence important for nonprofits in today's world?
Yeah, I think there was a time when it was like a nice to have, but we are in the need to have time where it's no longer something that you can leave at the bottom of your to-do list or put into next year. I see definitely social media being a must, an optimized website, rocking and rolling, being a must. And I think the most forgotten piece of digital marketing is email. Email is huge, making sure that you are regularly building your list and regularly talking to your list. Like if you have that trifecta going, you're going to set yourself up for a really good stage of growth.
Definitely agree. Thank you so much, Christina, for starting us off. Cliff, I'm going to bring this same question over to you. Why is considering your nonprofit's digital presence so important today?
Well, one of the things that we found is that digital is, like Christina said, not something that you can put at the bottom of your to-do list. We're seeing habits that folks have developed during the pandemic, which is being online first, transcend pandemic and going into post-pandemic times. People are using the digital experience as their primary experience for engaging with organizations. And we also think digital is your front door. It's the way that you can disseminate information about the values of your organization quickly to users without having to do these large, impactful sort of campaigns that are also very cost effective at the end of the day. Doing something in digital as opposed to doing something in print or terrestrial video is something that is very cost effective for sort of nonprofit organizations.
Fantastic. Ellen, over to you. Thoughts on today's world and why a digital presence is so important?
Let me start by echoing what Christina and Cliff have already said. I won't repeat it. I think it's amazing that there is anybody left who doesn't understand that you have to have a digital presence, which includes outreach, social media, and email marketing. The one thing I want to add is that there's something fantastic about using all of these tools, and that is the data you get. Okay, I'm a data geek, right? But we're going to find out which types of visitors are visiting us. When is it a client, somebody who is a recipient of the services the nonprofit delivers? When is it a donor? When is it a prospective speaker or trainer or employee? So it's not just that we make pretty, oh, look, pretty, but that we can analyze what's going on and continuously crank up our messaging to make it better and more effective.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ellen. All right, Jessica, I think you know what question's coming your way. Why is our digital presence so important?
I think one of the really cool advantages, especially for nonprofits who are maybe a little bit smaller or maybe a little bit newer, is it makes it so much easier to find your supporters, even in those early phases. And they may not be the people in your backyard. They may not be, the people that you know in your community that you can reach through word of mouth. They may be people who, if you're in Atlanta, Georgia, where I am, maybe your best supporters are in Nebraska. And it's really exciting to be able to reach out and really take movements global and really have that capacity building in a really scalable way that doesn't take as much of your team's time, and as Cliff and Christina and Ellen have all alluded to, doesn't take as much of your budget. So I think those are some of the really exciting things about digital.
Absolutely. Ellen, do you want to jump back in?
Yeah, I just want to add something Jessica said. I've been in business for a very long time. This is the most effective asynchronous period we've ever lived in. We can speak like we're all speaking today, and somebody in Cape Town can see it and get the message either tonight because they have insomnia, or tomorrow when it's their workday. So that is what inbound marketing is all about. And it really, as you said, Jessica, it really reduces the one-to-one live requirements way down.
Definitely. All right, I'm excited to move to the next question. Very quickly, I want to note in the chat, someone has said that they're having trouble submitting a question in the questions tab. So sorry about that. Not sure what's happening. I'm sure my colleague Malou is working on it, but you are also welcome to submit your your question directly in the chat, and Malou will make sure it gets over to me. So please use that platform if the questions tab is not working for you. All right, Ellen, I'm going to have you start us off with our next question. In your experience, what are some of the most effective digital and budget-friendly strategies to put in place as a nonprofit? What gaps could nonprofits fill with some strategic upgrades?
First, I want to talk about a gap in web design, and that is getting into too many details without stating your value proposition clearly. Second thing is having lots of contact forms on your website. Third is use social media, not just to say you should know we exist, or we're having a job fair on Friday. Market to your various personas to attract people using social media, and make sure you have contact conversion forms related to every one of those social media posts. In other words, raise money from social media. I could go on forever. I won't.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ellen. Jessica, over to you. Thoughts on how to have an effective digital and budget-friendly strategy to put in place as a nonprofit, and any gaps we should particularly be looking for?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of grabbing corporate money and using that to power your social goods. So there are a lot of programs out there that give nonprofits access to like free or reduced price digital tools. So in my line of work, I'm a little partial to the Google Ad Grant, which is $10,000 in free digital ad spend. But there's a lot of really great tools out there that are available and that are customized for nonprofits. One other resource I can recommend is TechSoup. If you're not already signed up there, you really should be, because they offer a lot of discounts for nonprofits and can kind of help you get plugged in. But I think that making sure that your team is taking advantage of areas where you can be increasing your impact while not increasing your cost, because you don't shrink your way to greatness. So I think it's important to make sure that you're looking at how can you project your channels out.
Definitely. Thank you, Jessica. Christina, over to you. Any thoughts on how to be effective with our digital and budget-friendly strategies, and any gaps we should be looking for?
Yeah, I focus mainly on organic marketing. So I will be the yin to Jessica's yang here on this. And because that's my lens, organic marketing is you and your time, basically. And one of the places I think that so many organizations get stuck is they're all doing it the same way. They're all putting out the same images and like a flavor of the same content, and especially the copy. So the messaging, the words you choose sound a lot like everybody else in your sector. So it's free. It costs nothing to actually sound like you. The only thing it costs is that it might feel a little bit different. It might feel a little bit daring. It might feel a little bit uncomfortable, but it is the secret to standing out online. So I would, if you leave with anything today from me, I would say, what does it actually sound like when you're having coffee with a friend, you're talking about your mission, and how can that actually be the email you write or the social post? Because that's going to be a lot more shareable.
Definitely. All right, Cliff, over to you. Anything to add to this conversation about strategies and gaps to fill?
Being on the website of things, I think content. Absolutely optimizing your content to speak to your users. I think Ellen mentioned the idea of leveraging content to speak to your specific user persona is something that is incredibly, incredibly important. And what we find with a lot of nonprofits in this space is they think they have an idea of who their user is, but they haven't taken the time to take steps to validate that. Some qualitative testing of your users to understand what their motivations are, and then writing content to actually activate those users and move them through your organization and get them to that conversion point is really important at the end of the day.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Cliff. Very quickly, I want to let our audience know that we have had a poll go live. We've asked you all, when it comes to considering a new digital strategy, what is most important to you and your nonprofit? I see 2 of you have already found that poll, but feel free to go and make your vote if you want us to know a little bit more about what's important to you and your organization, as well as this is just my other reminder to submit those questions either via the questions tab or the chat so we can make sure to address the topics relevant to you. I can ask my questions all day. That sounds like lots of fun to me, but it might not be as helpful as submitting your own questions. All right, Jessica, I'm going to have you start us off with our next one. If nonprofits are really hoping to get in front of new supporters, what advice do you have? What resources or tools are out there for them?
Yeah, I think there's basically 2 main levers that I would kind of prioritize pulling, and you might have conversations internally about which one best suits sort of your organization's needs. There's this lever of discoverability, which some platforms are going to be a little bit better for. And then there's this lever of like what I would call social capital or social proof, which other platforms are going to be slightly better for. So, in that discoverability side, these are things like social media or Google, where you're showing up in search results, people are finding new things this way. And so I think I have a slight bias towards Google because you are making sure that you're getting in front of people who are searching for things that are literally quite relevant to you, whether you choose to go the organic route or the paid route. So it just kind of allows you to really focus on people who are going to be very supportive of your mission. But I think social can be another really great avenue for it. And the advantage to social is there's this element of like social proof. So you get these recommendations from friends, you get the likes and the retweets and what have you at the bottom. So I think both of those are considerations, and the exact mix of those that you're going to want to choose is probably really dependent on your organization and your goals. So are you looking to kind of increase just general brand awareness, in which case maybe that discoverability is a better lever to pull? Or are you kind of trying to increase, how closely people feel aligned to your organization, in which case maybe some of that social proof and maybe some of that feeling like you're creating a relationship with your supporters via social and other channels might be a better lever to pull.
Great. Thank you so much, Jessica. Christina, over to you. Thoughts on how to get new supporters in the door and using resources and tools that are out there?
Yeah, I have this like visual in my head of a pie chart. And I think what most organizations do is they think about their own content, and they spend a lot of time for marketing where they're thinking about like what content I should put out there, what stories I should tell. And it's content just being blasted out for content's sake. And then they come to me and they're like, where is everybody? Why isn't it working? And I would rather they spend a lot less time on their own content and a lot more time developing partnerships with digital ambassadors and influencers, and building out a process I call a social street team, right? So that they're actually building a digital ambassador program to help advocate, raise their visibility, and they actually get that social proof that Jessica was talking about as well. And it really helps to get buzz, and it helps to really speak to that pain point I know we've all felt, where you put a piece of content out there and you're like, great, my aunt liked it. I love my aunt, but that's not helping move the needle. So, it really is stepping outside of your own bubble and doing it a different way.
Definitely. We appreciate the aunt support, but we need some other people in the door. Awesome. Cliff, over to you. Thoughts on getting those new supporters and using resources and tools available?
I think one of the ways that you get new supporters that is underserved by a lot of nonprofit organizations is you have built-in advocates. You have an audience that you can use to help get you in front of new supporters. And speaking to that audience, leveraging your current users as a way to get yourself in front of new supporters is always a good thing. We find that one of the ways that we tend to do this is by email marketing is mentioned. And that is one of those things that is so underserved. Segmenting your email marketing list, understanding what type of user is engaging with what type of content, and then marketing, making it shareable, making it something that can potentially go viral, making sure that these users are not just consuming your content, but also becoming advocates for your organization as a whole.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Cliff. All right, Ellen, what do you want to add if we're trying to get new supporters in the door?
Well, I want to add something, having something interactive on your site. A survey. What do you know about fill in the blank name of orphan disease? Guest blogs from mission adjacent organizations, bringing in speakers, doing a podcast, and not just blabbering about your own organization, but bringing in a scientist who addresses fill in the blank name of orphan disease, and so on. I also have to say, excuse me, everybody, but I have to give a plug to Nexus Marketing because I became one of Nexus's clients, and they feed my website with a lot of guest blogs. And the fascinating thing about this is, guess what happens? People write to me and say, that blog you wrote on something I know nothing about really spoke to me. So it says all over it, written by Cliff Perso. I wish you would write something for me, blah, blah, blah. And people say, well, and it was just wonderful. So there are tools like that. If you're in a field, for example, like hunger relief or social justice, why not make community with similar organizations and talk about how they got something accomplished? Bring them in as guests. All of this stuff, the guest blogs and guest podcast and webinar guests, really do a lot to put your name in lights somehow. At least that's been my experience, and I'm sticking with it.
I'm so glad to hear it. Thank you for the Nexus plug, Ellen. Glad it's been a positive experience.
Very much.
All right,
so.
Cliff, I'm going to have you start us off with our next question. What are some key metrics that nonprofits should be tracking in order to measure the success of their marketing efforts? And how can these metrics be used to make data-driven decisions?
So I think we're entering into a world of post analytics where a single metric is not something that is going to be meaningful to users and meaningful to nonprofits to make the strategic decisions that they need for future success. The things that I would recommend nonprofits look at is to look at their user journeys, to understand how users are traversing through their experience. We find that single touchpoint experiences like isolated social posts, this is the thing that we did, don't really move the needle that much. What you really should be looking at is a full life cycle of a user, starting at initial engagement and ending at a conversion point. And then analyzing those things and understanding where users show affinity across that journey, amplifying those things, and then deprioritizing the things where they don't show as much affinity. So it's not just about a single touch point anymore. It's about the single life cycle of a user throughout a particular journey. The way that we colloquially refer to it at Canopy is, consider yourself Yoda and the user is Luke Skywalker. You're guiding them through a journey, and the destination is that conversion point. And you need to understand where they're strong in the Force and where there's opportunities for improvement across the way. I should also mention that wherever possible, when I do these, I try to sneak Star Wars references into any answer that I give at any point in time. But understanding that journey is going to be relatively critical to gaining success in future campaigns that you implement as well.
I'm so glad you stuck that reference in. Makes the panel all the better, Cliff. Thank you so much. Ellen, over to you. Any thoughts on key metrics that nonprofits should be tracking to measure success and using metrics to make data-driven decisions?
Well, I'm going to depart from marketing and talk about sales. Ooh, I said the dirty word, fundraising. Many people who know my work know that I have never worked in a fundraising department, but I worked for 20 years in corporate high-end sales. And when I started to consult to nonprofits, I realized management is not being fair or supportive to those who generate the income that makes it possible to have mission achievement. So the key performance indicators that I'm always after, oddly enough, Cliff, mirror the donor's journey. And the opportunity stages in our version of a CRM are, do they like what we do? Do we like what they're interested in? Do they like us and do we like them? And are they willing to consider becoming engaged? Are they willing to consider a gift proposal, for example? Are they able to, or are they willing to and actively pursue negotiating the terms and scope of the investment? And do they give? In addition to that, there are key performance indicators about first-time donors, retained donors, upgraded donors or other funders. I think people have thought about this. They don't appear to have locked it into any of their tracking mechanisms, or at least they haven't until we get our hands on them. But I think the analogy with your perspective, Cliff, that there is a marketing journey that starts with awareness and ends with a conversion to either being a client, a service delivery client, a donor, or maybe trying to get a job there. So I think those two things go together.
Thank you, Ellen. Jessica, over to you. Any thoughts on key metrics and using metrics to make data-driven decisions?
Yeah, I would really echo Ellen's focus on revenue. I think it can be really tempting to focus on some metrics that I would, like, if I was being a little spicy, might call vanity metrics. So, for example, like likes on a social post don't mean a whole lot if those people don't go on to take the next step. And I think that's one of the common critiques that digital advocacy gets, is like, oh, well, a bunch of people signed a petition, but did anything actually change? Did anything, meaningfully differ between before they knew about it and afterwards? And so I think as an organization, you should be thinking of, okay, what are these meaningful actions that help carry your mission forward? And maybe that's donating. Maybe that is registering for an event. Maybe that is signing up to volunteer. Like, they don't all have to be specifically someone handed us money, but they are things that enable you to make the difference. And this is sort of what Cliff was hinting at as well when he talked about conversions. Like, any kind of meaningful action can be set up as a conversion, but you should really have your eyes on like what are the things that make our mission expandable, what are things that make our mission possible, what are the things that kind of deliver our organization's purpose, and what are the then if we take one step back, what is kind of the journey, or what are the things that indicate people are along that path, less so what are kind of the overall metrics that say our nonprofit is popular, because you can have a nonprofit with tons and tons of Twitter followers who never give a donation, and that's not super helpful.
Definitely. Thank you, Jessica. All right, Christina, any closing thoughts on metrics?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Jessica. And also maybe even a little bit like comforting that you don't need a lot of followers to make a lot of money. And I think that's kind of the misnomer, is like, if I could just get this number of followers or this number of likes, that would get me there. And that's not always true. I mean, I know that that's not true for a lot of the organizations I work with. You can do really, really well with a really highly engaged group of followers. So that's one thing I wanted to say. The second is, I would love this if everyone would just take a moment, or it would take a few moments, to really look at who were their like one and done donors last year, right? And look at like what percentage that was. That would be some interesting data, and then compare it year over year, because those are your warmest leads. It is so much easier to re-engage those people, or start to engage them. Maybe you haven't really at all. Maybe they were from this year, right? And really start to engage and steward them and nurture them. It's much easier to do that than to do it cold, right? Where we're starting from scratch and we're having to do the know, like, trust thing and all the marketing speak that we talk about. So that would be a data point to look into. The other piece is, I like to think about the people who are in your world, in your ecosystem, that are like lurkers or silent supporters. So the data on them is just, they haven't done anything, but they're still here. So they're people that are opening your emails, they're clicking your emails, they're like my aunt, they're liking your posts, but they're not really doing anything else. That's, again, a really warm lead. And figuring out what their interest is, figuring out maybe the positioning, the offer, the messaging, something has been amiss. Maybe it's confusing what you do. Maybe they got on your list 3 years ago and they kind of forgot about you. Like, those are some other people that are on your list. And I'm not talking about the people who haven't opened an email in a year, not them, the other ones, but the people who haven't taken an action. Those would be people to look at.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Christina. All right, I have one final question for our group before I'm officially moving over to audience and registration questions. So I know we've had a few come in, but please feel free to keep submitting them. Now would be a great time to get any questions in for our group of panelists. But before I open that door, I do quickly want to ask my final question. And Cliff, I'm going to have you start us off. Sometimes nonprofit professionals face pushback from leaders or board members when making changes. Any advice on how to get buy-in from leadership on new or improved digital strategies when facing resistance to change?
So this is actually a really great question. This is the question I was looking to answer the most on this panel. I want to preface this by saying that we've seen a reduction of this dramatically over the last few years. I don't think it goes back to our first question, where I don't think there's any nonprofit that doesn't understand that they need to evolve and they need to move their product forward. But when we encounter challenges with leadership or stakeholders that they need to get buy-in, one of the things that we do is we take a 3-point approach. The first thing we do is we make it about the users, not about the stakeholders. So we tend to do things like phrasing questions with a user focus. So we're not asking the stakeholder, what do you think about this new feature or functionality? We're asking that question in a way that is, what do you think users would resonate most with this particular feature? It kind of changes the thinking from a internal thinking to an external thinking, and they start thinking about their users. The other thing that we do to help get buy-in from stakeholders is we talk about this thing called afters at Canopy, which is the idea of what comes after we do this thing. What is the thing that happens after this thing that we want to happen? A lot of times we get very focused on that endpoint of, this thing did really well, let's try and do it again. But what do we do to amplify that in future? And the other thing is, the way that we present this is we take a 3-point approach. We approach it as, here's what we want to do. Here's why it's important for your organization to do this. And here's how it carries your mission forward. And what we find is whenever we implement these 3 things with stakeholders, we tend to get buy-in a lot more, and it removes sort of the internal looking and sort of starts to put the focus on what users would resonate with and what comes after we do this thing within an organization.
Thank you so much, Cliff. Really appreciate you starting us off with that one. I'm excited to hear from our other panelists, but I do want to let our audience know we've had another poll go live. We've asked you, have you or your team experienced pushback from leadership when trying to implement something new? And for all of your all's sakes, I hope you can push the button that says never. However, would love to hear kind of what your experience is with pushback with innovation in the past few years. All right, Christina, over to you. Any advice for handling board and leadership when innovation is on the table?
Yeah, I mean, I think as we're thinking about innovation, it's true that what got you to where you are today is not what's going to get you to where you want to be. If you could just do the exact same thing over and over again, then you would have gotten to that other place by now, right? So sort of getting some buy-in on that, some acceptance on that piece. Some curiosity on trying some new strategies is really, really important. I know that's really hard for established organizations on the trying new things piece, but I think dangling the carrot of like, if we want to grow, we have to try new things. Like in growth is, if you want to learn how to ride a bike, you got to get on the bike first and you're going to fall down a little bit, but you've got to look ahead at the finished product of that. So that's one piece that I would really focus on, is just this idea of it's really important to invest in the future of where you want to be and getting your leadership to, maybe even they don't all have to agree, but we need some agreement, right? And just that trust. The other piece that I wanted to mention is just that for-profit companies are not so short-sighted that they're like looking 3 months down the road for that ROI, or even a year down the road for that ROI. And because they're not doing that, they make a ton of money. So they must be onto something. There must be something there. And so this idea of being so tight about that investment, like whatever it is, or that new strategy or that new campaign, like we have to see the ROI right now, or we have to see it in 6 months, or else we're deciding it was a wash, is so hard and can be a ball and chain for a lot of organizations. Because a lot of times, hiring staff, creating that infrastructure, those SOPs is what gets you to that next revenue level, and is a thing that costs money to do, right? So it's like being able to have the buy-in of like, okay, this is part of our strategic vision. This is where we want to be, and these are the points that get us there.
Thank you so much, Christina. Ellen, over to you. Thoughts on handling pushback from leadership?
I really, really like what Christina was saying. I also remember something from my days long ago when I was selling mainframe computers, and that was a phrase used in the cube farms: ask for forgiveness, not permission. Get one champion who'll say, the heck with all this fussing around, here's my check, let's do it. I think that, in spite of the fact that that's a kind of snarky, for lack of a better term, remark, there's some truth to it. If you're trying to persuade your organization and your board to do something, you, a member of staff, have to be able to cost justify and conduct a return on investment calculation. Those two things, for-profit companies beat that stuff into the heads of their salespeople. They take classes in it. They have little calculators, the whole thing. There is, however, a phenomenon. I'm not going to give anybody my address because I'm afraid somebody's going to throw a bomb at me. What I see in our sector is we don't recruit board members who, or somehow the board members themselves, leave their business acumen at the door to the boardroom. And if we're going to be working in staff and we want to encourage this kind of innovative approach, we have to be the ones to take the risk of confronting that intransigent group. It's not, I would love to say this is not an easy challenge. This is an easy challenge, but it isn't. And I'm sure every one of us in this conversation can attest to the fact that the client either did nothing, or the organization did nothing, did the wrong thing, hired an inexperienced person to do a really mission critical job because they could get them at a lower salary cost, blah, blah, blah. All these things about, not spending money. One of the things I always say is, it seems to me that it's very painful for nonprofits to raise enough money, but it's even more painful for the board to approve spending that money. And that is something we have to work with our clients and our friends who are practicing in this sector to encourage them to be able to make a business case for the innovation or the investment.
Thank you so much, Ellen. I want to check back in on that poll because we are across the board. So again, we asked, have you or your team experienced pushback from leadership when trying to implement something new? And 40% of you said more often than we'd like, but fairly infrequently. 20% said, unfortunately, it's a regular occurrence. I'm so sorry about that. That sounds very stressful. 20% said not too often, but when it happens, it's frustrating. And then a lucky 20% said never. And if they want to let us know in the chat how they've achieved that, please do. I want to know how you've done that because that's fantastic. All right, Jessica, if it's okay with you.
And what are you feeding them?
Exactly. Jessica, if it's all right with you, I'm actually going to have you start us off with our registration questions. Is that good? Fantastic. We had a question come in from registration that says, we are a very small nonprofit with a small staff, of small social media following, and not a ton of fundraising in a given year. Where should we start when it comes to our digital marketing?
That is a huge question, and I'm sure every single person on this panel, and probably every single person who works in digital marketing, would have a slightly different answer. But I think my answer would be, really, you can't go wrong with getting your website dialed in, because this is really your calling card. If you are, if you want to kind of, I don't know, mix metaphors here, if you were going to introduce someone and hand them your business card, you would want to make sure that you looked very professional, your business card was very professional, that, somebody looking at you would think, okay, this is somebody who reasonably knows what they're doing. And so I think for that reason, your website is sort of your nonprofit's business card. And I would probably prioritize getting that really dialed in. So what that looks like in my mind is making sure that you have a, website that loads well, that is easy to navigate, that has content on it that speaks to why your mission is important, why you do what you do, how you do what you do, and the results of what you do. And I think if you kind of are thinking about those three main things, that's going to be a really strong baseline from which you can build everything else off of. But that would be probably the place that I would start.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jessica. Christina, over to you. Any thoughts or advice for someone who's working at a very small nonprofit with a small social media following?
Yeah, this may sound counter to what you expect, but unless you already have some sort of affinity for hanging out on TikTok or Instagram or wherever you hang out, don't spend a lot of time creating reels and TikToks and feeling like that's what you need to do. Again, thinking about that pie, don't spend a lot of time there. I want you to spend a lot of time fundraising, number one. So fundraising, making money, and building that digital ambassador program, because again, you're leveraging and getting in front of other people's audiences doing that. So it's a really powerful way to grow on social. And you want to keep the lights on your social network and make sure, kind of like your website, it says who you are, what you're about, why you're important, why you're different, where you are. I was looking at somebody's website today and I could not figure out if they were local, they served a local community or a national community. And I should know that, right? And ultimately I figured out they were hyper local. So they didn't, I'm in Atlanta too, Jessica. So they didn't serve Atlanta. So that would be great to know. You want to make sure the same thing on your Instagram. If you only serve Atlanta area, make sure you say that, or whatever your area is.
Thank you so much, Christina. Cliff, anything you want to add in terms of small nonprofits?
So both Jessica and Christina gave some really excellent answers, and I'm going to echo a little bit of what they said, which is, and I might be a little bit biased working for Canopy, where we build websites for nonprofits. But I think getting your website dialed in is really important. It is your front door. And one of the things that's often neglected in nonprofit sites is the user experience. You really want to make sure that your website has a frictionless experience. You're not putting up barriers to folks like that. And there are a lot of free tools out there that will let you know what those experiences look like. A great way to do this is run a lighthouse check on your website to see what it's doing. Delve into your analytics, see where people are abandoning their journey on the traversal of your website. There's a lot of small free things that you can do that can get you that holistic picture and help you improve that digital front door, that business card that you're using for your users. So that's the area that I think if you've got a limited team and a limited amount of budget, spend that time to create that frictionless experience. Because what we find is if you have something that works well and functions well, users are actually more likely to convert on those experiences as opposed to something that throws up barriers to them.
Fantastic. All right, Ellen, anything you want to add? Otherwise, I'm going to have you start us off with our next question.
The only thing I want to add is as soon as your website is really dialed in, I love that expression, start with LinkedIn and Facebook. Don't start with email marketing because you don't have a subscriber list yet.
Thank you so much. In that case, I'm going to stick with you for this next question. This came in during the chat, through the chat during the session. How do you recommend making the digital world help with capital campaigns? Oops, I lost the question. We are a small nonprofit therapeutic riding center. We're currently rent a 20-acre farm, but need to get a permanent location. Any recommendations for using marketing for a capital campaign?
I think it's a mistake to call it a capital campaign in the first place. I think the thing to do is say, we do great things and you should support us because we do these wonderful things for people who use equine therapy. That's it. In my experience, one of the worst things that I've seen small startup nonprofits do is to go for the purchase of a building or a stable or a riding ring or whatever the capital investment would be. Somehow tough it out as long as you can with rented space until you have hundreds of donors and thousands of engaged followers. Then you can start to say, we need our own stable. We need our own horses. We need our own physical building. We need our riding ring. And here are all these naming opportunities. But for the time being, raise more money on behalf of the mission.
Cliff, did you want to jump in?
I have to agree in that sense, but I'd like to add something as well to it. Demonstrate your successes. It's important for folks that are coming and are looking to invest in your organization that they see that you have a proven track record for success. And I feel like to echo something that Ellen said, a lot of people leave their business acumen at the door when they come to something like this. But you really do have to take a look at this as a business opportunity. And the way you get a buy-in from someone who is looking to present capitalization to your organization is showing that you can do the thing that you say that you do. So demonstrating your success is critical. Whether it's on social, whether it's on a website, whether it's on, in person, you have to prove that you're able to do the thing that you say you can do.
Fantastic. Anyone else want to jump in on this question? Christina?
Yeah, I just want to add that there's a part of me, and hopefully Elaine catches the replay because I know she can't hear, but hopefully she can catch us. There's a part of me that's like, I don't want her to wait until she feels like it's the right time before she goes after this dream. She's already got the organization. She's at 100K-ish. and she's there. And so let's make sure we have proof of concept, like Cliff's just said. But also, I don't know that you need to wait and wait and wait until you have a certain benchmark, because maybe the people will come. Like, it made me immediately think of, do you remember Kickstarter? I guess those are still a thing, right? Of like, that whole Kickstarter is just based on an idea in your head that hasn't come to fruition and garnering support for it, right? And so right now you sort of have the beta version of your nonprofit, you're renting space, hopefully it's working, and now you have this dream of this over here. And I think what, if I'm inferring the right thing, maybe you're thinking the capital campaign is something that will be raised over a course of a year or longer, right? And so you could think about it as certain milestones of fundraising that go towards this piece. And so if that helps you like take a bite out of it one piece at a time, then I think it's worth doing, worth trying.
Can I respond to that? Because I'm going to respond anyway. I just don't want the person who posted that message to think they have to do this whole big production called a capital campaign. That was my objection. Of course they should be raising money. And part of their fundraising message is help us grow to the point where we can have our own stable of horses and our own facility. If we take it out of capital campaign weirdness, we're fine. We don't have to hire a capital campaign consultant. We don't have to get pillar donors. We do have to say, look, this is what we've done. Look at how well it's working. We could do so much better if we had our own facility. Help us get there.
Jessica, did you want to jump in as well?
Yeah, although actually the point that I might have made might be a little contrary now. Which what I was going to say is one element of Elaine's question that I think we skimmed over is that they are looking for a capital campaign consultant, and if you decide that a capital campaign is the route you want to go, that is an excellent arena for digital resources to help you out, because you can do a lot of research digitally. You can ask for recommendations digitally. You can kind of vet your vendors that way. And so I think there's like a both like admirable quality to sort of like bootstrapping and wanting to do everything yourself, but there's also, going back to sort of the business analogy that we've said a million times on this call, businesses do not do every single function themselves all of the time. Sometimes they outsource their marketing or their hiring or what have you. And so if it's something that your team maybe just isn't, for whatever reason, super qualified for, or maybe just it's not in their wheelhouse, it's not really where your time and efforts are best applied, then I think using really strong digital research strategies to find effective consultants for you could be a really good route, if you decide to go that way. So, not to say that a capital campaign is inherently the answer. I think we've gotten a lot of really great responses here on why maybe it would be worth it to reframe the question. But if you decide that it is, using your digital tools to find an effective consultant is a really good application of that.
Absolutely. All right. Unfortunately, we are almost at our hour, so I do have to have us wrap up. I have one final question that I'm going to try to sneak in before we hit the hour, just so we hear from all of our panelists one final time. And Jessica, I'll actually have you start us off. What do you see as the future of nonprofit marketing and a digital presence for nonprofits, and how can nonprofits get ahead today?
Yeah. So I think as the number of nonprofits just that exist proliferate and access to platforms becomes like increasingly democratized, I think a lot of nonprofits should be investing in marketing and should be investing in their digital presence. And there are a lot of important reasons for that, some of which we've talked about on the call. You want to make sure that you are appealing to donors who are increasingly online. You want to be broadening your reach outside of your local area. And a third one, not to open like a can of worms in the closing, which I feel like is never a great strategy. Um, there is a lot of disinformation and imitators out there. And I think if you are not owning your own digital presence, what you are setting yourself up for is somebody else to mimic you and to kind of be at odds with you, whether that be scooping your donations, whether that be finding people who are really passionate about your cause and giving them a bunch of information that's just bunk. or kind of some of the other nefarious purposes we've heard about. So in addition to some of the really good stuff we've talked about on this call, you also want to make sure that you're owning your digital presence so that you can actually be the authority on you.
Thank you so much, Jessica. Christina, over to you. Thoughts on the future and how we can get ahead today?
Yeah, I think the more that we think about the fundraising budget and the marketing budget and those being equally important, the more you'll see an increase in revenue. The more we're willing to spend both and seeing how they both work in tandem and for and to and with each other, the more we will see organizations grow. And we already have seen the ones that kind of stand out and shine as the great marketers. And they're not just great marketers, they end up being great fundraisers. So I think we'll see more of that. I think, with AI being a huge topic, one of the things that's really interesting to me with marketing is like, it's been kind of fun seeing that so many nonprofits in the conversation, reading about it, participating in it, using ChatGPT. And I'm like, that's awesome, because I remember 10 years ago having to convince organizations why they should have a Facebook page. And now it seems like they're like, no, what should I do, Christina? How do I use ChatGPT for my organization? And I'm like, let's figure it out together. I'll tell you how I'm using it for my business and let's figure it out together. So I think that that's a really exciting addition to, and shows the sort of willingness to be early-ish adopters to things. So I'm excited.
I am also excited. Thank you so much, Christina. All right, Ellen, over to you. Thoughts on the future and how we can get ahead today?
Never be afraid to try something new. Save some of your time for professional development. Always be saving some of your time for professional development, which means exploring some of these new tools and options and methods of presentation. Think about the way you manage your organization, which includes managing your marketing and managing your fundraising, as well as managing those involved in client service delivery. I just don't think there's enough discipline in those areas to allow the nonprofit sector to regain its position as the most trusted sector. We used to hold that position in the global Edelman Trust survey, and now for-profit corporations have more trust from their buyers than nonprofits. So you can't run a business anymore, unless it's an illegal business, without really good digital, a really good holistic digital presence, website and everything else. And you can't afford to be left behind.
Thank you, Ellen. All right, Cliff, closing us out, any thoughts on the future and how we can get ahead today?
I have two things. I think personalization is going to be very important for marketers moving forward. Speaking to your users and reaching users where they are. If it's something as simple as creating customized landing pages for email campaign marketing segments. But what you want to do is you want your users to feel like when they experience your product, when they experience your organization, you are speaking directly to them. And so I think personalization is going to be something that's going to be really interesting to see how that grows, especially as we move into a cookieless future, which I think is going to be really interesting and challenging for marketers to have to tackle. But I also think one of the things that's really bright on the marketing front, especially for nonprofits, is the barrier to entry for tools that will move your marketing campaigns forward and data collection have become so low that you can get really, really powerful information by not spending a little. And as Christina mentioned, AI, I think, is going to be huge for nonprofits. There are some ethical and legal complications that come along with that we still need to figure out. But looking at something like ChatGPT or Midjourney, those are really, really interesting tools for people who do not have a lot of capital, who do not have large teams, that can look to quickly leverage and generate something or generate ideas for campaigns without having to invest a lot of upfront time, effort, and money at the end of the day. So I think AI is a really interesting thing. We just have to figure out how to use it ethically and what the legal guidelines for that are. But I think it's a bright, open future for marketers in terms of the tools that they'll be able to leverage there.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Cliff. All right. With that, we have reached the end of our panel. I want to give a big thank you to our panelists. I know if we were in an in-person setting, there would be a round of applause. So just know I'm sending that to you emotionally through the screen today. I do also want to give a big thank you to our audience. Thank you so much for taking an hour out of your day, whether you are live or watching the recording. Hope you enjoyed yourself. Hope you learned something that could support the amazing work that you are already doing. We are rooting for you. You've got this. We're just trying to help you along that way to your goals. We have a packed spring and summer of panels ahead of us, so keep your eye out on the NX Unite website, the NX Unite LinkedIn page, or you can even find me on LinkedIn so you can find the panels relevant to you and your team. We have panels such as storytelling for nonprofits, capacity building, corporate social responsibility, and more. So keep your eye out for anything that might be relevant. All right, we are over time, so I've got to let you all go. Thank you again so much, and I hope you all have a nice rest of your day.